In the last few videos, we saw how the Visual Basic for Applications editor works. We looked at the testing, debugging, and code writing features provided by it, and also we looked at how the windows in the Visual Basic editor work. In this video, let us look at some of the syntax aspects of the language. We will not look at these syntax aspects deeply, we will just have an overview of them and see how the keywords, statements, and language structures work, what modules are and how much code they can store, the importance of comments, the importance of variables and constants in our code, what are libraries. We will also look at some errors and have an overview of the tools available to handle them. So without further ado, let us look at keywords. Keywords are used by the language for specific tasks in a macro. They are reserved in the language and you can't use them for anything else. Let us look at an example. Let me go to the Visual Basic editor and look at a macro. So this is a macro. It starts from sub and ends with end sub. So all these words which are colored in blue are keywords. Dim, option explicit, sub, end sub, all these words are keywords. We can't use them for naming our variables or macros. For example, if I try to write sub and after that another sub, this can't be the name of my macro. If I press enter, it gives me an error. So I have to use any other name other than a keyword. So for example, if I write sub dim, it will not let me do that. Or if I write option, it will not let me do that. So all these are keywords and they are reserved by the language. You can't use them for any of your purposes. You have to use them as per specific rules provided by the language. Statements. A statement is a complete sentence that can be compiled and run. It is made up of keywords, symbols, text, object, properties and method names, etc. It is a complete unit of code that does something. You don't need any special character to end a statement. Let us look at these aspects in the code. So in this macro, this is a complete statement. It uses a keyword, it names the macro, and after that it has these open and close brackets. This is a statement which ends the macro. This is a statement and it calls another macro and provides it some arguments to work with. This is another statement. You would also notice that these statements do not end with a special character. Other languages like Java require you to end the line with a semicolon, but in Visual Basic you can end the line by pressing enter. So this carriage return line feed character, which is invisible, is the indication that you want to end the line. You don't have to use any special character. Language structures are the statements that go together and complete the code structure. If and if is a language structure. If you write if without an end if, it will throw an error. In some cases, the structure is completed automatically by the compiler. As soon as you write sub statement, compiler writes an end sub statement. Let us look at an example. You can write your macros in between two macros. You can write a new macro here or you can write a new macro here also after end sub. So I'll go here and I'll type sub test and I'll press enter. As soon as I do that, it writes these two open and close brackets and it writes this end sub automatically. Let us look at it again. I typed sub test1 and I pressed enter. You can see it does that again. So these are called structures. Sub always goes with an end sub. Likewise, there are other code structures. For example, this is a select case structure. It always starts with a select case and then it tests a condition, and then after that there are case statements which do different things based on the result of that condition, and then it ends with an end select. Similarly, this is a if statement and it starts with an if and ends with an end if. So if you write an if but if you don't write an end if, when you compile the code it will raise an error. Let me go here and show you an example. So if I write if 2 is greater than 3, then, and let us not write the end if statement and try to compile the code. If I click debug compile VBA project, it raises an error here. It says block if without an end if. Now it raises that error at a wrong line. It shows the wrong line highlighted, but you can see that because there is no end if here, it goes through the whole macro. It is not able to compile it because end if was not found, and that is where it raised an error at this line. So if I write an end if, then compile it, it will compile it without any error. Structures have a specific order. You can't write an end if and after that an if. This is completely wrong. If always comes before an end if, and end if always comes after the if. So if you try to compile this code, it will stop at this line and it will raise that error. A module can store one or more macros. This module contains this macro and many other macros also. So these are all different macros which are in the same module. You can look at them by clicking this drop down here, all the macros that are available in this module. How you will arrange your macros in a module is totally up to you. You can move this macro, cut it and paste it here if you like. It is totally up to you how you keep your sequence of macros, in which module you keep your macros, and what names you will give your macros. You can have any macro in any module. A macro can have one or more lines of code, but a module is limited by 64 KB of compiled code. So if you are recording a long macro which goes beyond 64 KB, then it will raise an error after that. The macro will not run. The key is to break the task at hand into steps and write small macros, one for each step. Let us move on to comments. Proper comments are the key for good code. You should always write comments in your macro that describe the task at hand, what you are trying to do, what was the requirement of the project, so that when after 6 months you are editing your code, you know by looking at your macros how they work. Comments are not interpreted by the compiler. So if I write a comment which starts with an apostrophe or a single quote, if you want to write a multi-line comment, you can write it like this. You should write a space at the end and an underscore character for line continuation, and then you should start in the next line. And this is a complete line of comment. You can also write it like this. This is also allowed. They are colored in green to differentiate them from other code. Variables are memory stores for your data. We will look at variables in later videos, but just to give you an overview, you can store something in a variable and later use it in your macro. I'll show you an example. So if we go to this module, these are variables. So this is a variable declaration statement. This is the variable assignment statement. So here a cell is declared, and here in this statement a cell is assigned active cell. So then active cell, the whole object is stored in a cell variable by this statement. Variables can store many types of information. They can store text, numbers and object references, etc. The example we saw stores an object inside a variable name. So then after that you can call this object by this name in your macro. So here if you look at this line of code, it uses this variable name to point to this object. You can use them to simplify your code. We will look at variables in later videos when we write some useful macros. For the time being, just understand that variables are an important aspect of your code. Like variables, constants are also memory stores. They also store some information, but that information cannot be changed afterwards. I will show you examples of constants when we are writing code. Then there are code libraries. Code libraries are pre-written code that is stored inside libraries. I will show you an example. If I press F2 here, this object browser opens and I can see all the libraries which are available for my code here. So this is the Excel object library which provides all the Excel objects that are there, like ranges, pivot tables, worksheets, workbooks. All those objects which are provided by Excel are in this library. When you start a new project, these libraries are automatically referenced by your code, so you don't have to do anything to reference them. Like this VBA library has all the VBA functions and capabilities that are provided by VBA. So libraries are used to arrange your code in a proper way so that it can be looked at, it can be searched, and it can be arranged better. So you know that all your Excel objects are in this Excel library, and when you are looking for them, if you select this Excel library from here, it will show you objects from that library only. So libraries are used for better arrangement of code. Errors will take place and you have to handle them. There is no other way. There are many tools available in VBA to handle them. I have shown you some of them, like the compiler. So this debug compile is your friend. Whenever you write a piece of code, you should compile your project so that it traces any compiler errors that are there in your code. We will discuss more about errors later in this course. So let us dive into it.